All right, Apple's iPhone is about to enter the world's largest wireless market, and according to Piper Jaffray, it could sell more than 3 million units in China in its first year. For more on this, let's bring in Piper Jaffray's Gene Munster. He has a buy on Apple. And Gene, let me ask, first of all, if you're not concerned that 3 million is a little bit of an underestimate. I mean, obviously a huge country, and the people there are turning more and more into consumers that buy these kind of electronics. 3 million in the first year doesn't sound like really hitting it out of the park.
Well, it's 10% of the overall iPhone units, and this is a new market for them. So we're trying to take it conservative. That could end up being some upside to those numbers. Ultimately, we think overall for the iPhone, there's going to be a lot of upside to those numbers in the next couple of years. But trying to keep it conservative, as you said.
What do you think about the internet use in China? I mean, what can that tell you about the iPhone? Because one thing I noticed when I used an iPhone after having used a BlackBerry for so long is that the connectivity is so much better.
Exactly. Well, I also cover some of the big China internet companies as well, so I know a lot about that front. There's about 300 million internet users in China versus about 180 million in the U.S., so that just surpassed the U.S. about a year and a half ago. So there's huge internet usage. This is a market that potentially could be 20–25% of Apple's units. The biggest challenge, obviously, is disposable income. When you have the average person making about $7,000 a year, it's a little bit difficult to be paying for the phone. The addressable market is probably about 200 million people, and so it's a similar addressable market size as the U.S.
So, Gene, Lori Rothman here. How will the iPhone-BlackBerry competition play out? Who's going to be the winner?
Well, ultimately, we think that Apple's going to win between those two. Obviously, the BlackBerry is going to own the kind of the business segment, but as far as the consumer is concerned, I think it's going to get progressively more difficult for BlackBerry. Obviously, that some of their efforts with Storm, for example, just haven't really produced the results that BlackBerry has liked. And the iPhone, this has almost turned into a movement versus just a cell phone. It's a paradigm shift from a cell phone to a computer in your pocket. And Apple, basically, it's in their wheelhouse at this point.
Why is it that BlackBerry automatically wins when you talk about the corporate user? Is it just the keyboard and how much easier it is to type emails and do work, or is it relationships with corporate technology units?
The keyboard's part of it. The bigger thing is just they're embedded essentially in the infrastructure of businesses, the back office, the server side. They have a lot of technology back there that companies don't want to take out, essentially. And so it's safe, it's proven. It's just going to be very difficult for Apple to beat BlackBerry and RIM and the enterprise, but the consumers were the real battlefield. It's going to be in the next 5 years.
What is it about China that took Apple so long to get in there? I mean, you'd think automatically that you look to this market when you're selling this kind of device. Why the fourth quarter of 2009 to start?
Well, we've been over there and we've talked to the major carriers, and there's two major issues. Number one is the government has some restrictions in terms of what these mobile devices can do and their accessibility to the internet. So that's been the biggest piece, is working through government challenges. And the second is the carriers want a cut of the App Store and the iTunes online store. And obviously, Apple doesn't want to share that revenue. So there's been some finagling in terms of how the economics of these are split. So between the two, they're about 2.5 years late to market.
Gene, you mentioned the carrier Unicom, I believe, will carry iPhone in China. The U.S. debut of iPhone, AT&T Wireless, had some problems in its initiation. Do you foresee any of those similar problems with Unicom?
Probably not with Unicom, because, again, the number of users is going to be less than it is in the U.S., and it's a relatively new network versus AT&T had to upgrade their network. So don't expect that. But ultimately, this is not an exclusive relationship. They will likely get China Mobile. It's hard to figure out when that will be, but that will add close to another 275 million on top of the 180 million current China Unicom. So there's a lot more to go with the China market if they add China Mobile.
Apple shares topped out last Friday. Comment on the current share price valuation, whether it's accurately reflective of your forecast for China iPhone sales.
Well, ultimately, we think that there's significant upside to the iPhone. If that does happen, the numbers are going higher, which should be good for the stock.
Hey, let me just ask you quickly about the exclusive relationship here with AT&T. Does that help Apple, or do you think they'll be happy when they can finally get rid of that and everyone carries it?
Well, eventually, we think that exclusivity will go away. That could be as early as next summer, and that will be a big positive. If you look at, for example, the France market, that they started with one carrier, Orange, and now they have 3 carriers because the French government basically required them to go to 3 carriers. Apple has about 40% share in the consumer smartphone market versus 15% in the rest of the world. And so, in other words, the model shows that when you go to multiple carriers, you get a big uptake in your market share, which ultimately we'll think they'll want to do in the U.S.
All right. Hey, Gene, thanks very much for joining us. Gene Munster there from Piper Jaffray.